as you can see, there's lots of aspects to understanding second suites that are going to be imperative for us to learn as realtors. One of the things where I think that what Andrew was talking about is parking, is I noticed that we were talking about it in our governance committee about on our listings we can put how many parking spaces are on there, and if we put 5 parking spaces, 2 up to the sidewalk and 1 crossing the sidewalk, we've got to be a little careful, I guess, as time goes by now on how many parking spaces we advertise on our listings, because if a buyer buys it with the idea of putting second suites, or a second suite, or a second suite, which we used to call a triplex, which is now a second suite. Just so you know, I think that we're going to be starting to refer to, or you may see on a listing, John, that you see what we call a laneway garage. You may see realtors have a flair for that sort of thing. It's called a coach house. Yes. So we're going to continue on with our next panel, and we're going to make sure that you get some more information here. And we're going to, for our second panel, we're going to ask Tanya Sari to come up and introduce our panelists.
Thanks, Robin. Good morning, everybody. You're still doing good? All right, so we're going to move on to the second panel, and this one is focused on the build-out and payoff of second suites. Sounds exciting? We're going to help build affordable community through that. So I'm going to ask Tim Kent and Michael Janotta to come on up to the stage. Thank you, Tim and Michael, for being here. Tim Kent is the CEO of Redwood Park Communities, and Michael Janotta is the Chief Building Official for the City of Barrie. So we're going to do this panel similar to our last one. So each panelist will have 10 minutes to give their presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So Tim, it looks like you get to go first.
Great, thank you, Tanya, for the introduction. It's great to be here. Thanks very much to the BDR for putting this on. We've done a couple of these types of things over the last couple of years, and it's been always a very good event with lots of great questions, and it's been a great learning experience for everyone involved. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here again and talk about second suites. In terms of Redwood Park Communities, for those who aren't familiar with Redwood Park Communities, we are a local based in Barrie, registered charity, and our focus is to build and develop affordable housing, and we tend to come from a very innovative approach when doing that and looking at ways that we can just get doors open and families in. Now, our focus, you heard in the last panel, the idea about housing first and supports wrapped around the families and individuals living in the affordable housing. And that really is our focus. We're very focused on creating a sense of community and connectedness with the tenants and occupants that we work with. And so Second Suites is a huge part of what we're doing in the city and what we're trying to do in terms of encouraging others and encouraging our community and property owners to get involved and create a second suite. It is the most, at this stage anyways, it's the most affordable way of creating some new housing for the property owner, but also for a tenant who's in need of a place to stay. The average cost of a building a second suite can vary. It really does depend on the size, whether you're doing a bachelor unit or a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. At this point, 3 bedrooms aren't an option under second suites, so the maximum number of bedrooms would be 2. And depending on the configuration of the property and all kinds of things that go along with that, that could add cost. So for example, if you have if you want to do a second suite in your basement, there's very small windows in the basement, then those windows have to be enlarged, and that can be a little bit more costly than if you've already got large windows in your basement and you can make use of the existing windows and that type of thing. So there's different elements of the construction process that could increase the cost of doing a second suite. But typically a second suite could be anywhere from about $45,000 to $65,000. And when you compare that to taking a raw piece of land and building a new housing, rental housing project, and all the costs associated with doing that, Your cost can be as high as $220,000, $230,000 per unit when you're going that route. So to be able to create a new 2-bedroom unit is very, very cost effective at, even if it was $60,000. Huge amount of benefit for the homeowner. I do have slides, I'm just talking away. Let's see how this works. I don't know how this works. Oh, there we go. Oh, there, see? There's all about Redwood and our mission, what we're trying to do. What is a Redwood second suite? So I don't really need to explain that, but for the purposes of Redwood, a second suite for Redwood is actually a unit that is created specifically for a family who is in need, so somebody that's more vulnerable in our community. And what's unique about what we do is we'll come alongside a property owner and essentially partner with you to get that second suite done. And we will come in and we will assess your property and take a look at what needs to be done with the property. And then we will help connect you to any funding sources that are available. Could be the funding from the county. We will prepare the building permit, the drawings that are required, because you do have to have drawings that are done for the second suite. We'll get that all taken care of and get that building permit submitted, help you through the building permit process and dealing with any issues to come up with that. And then we will come in partnership with construction arm, which is Community Builders. They will come in and build the unit. And then Redwood, once the unit is completed, will lease that space back from you to house families that are vulnerable, and then we'll provide the supports to those families that are there. And that's fantastic for somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience being a landlord or has no experience being a landlord, but are really interested in having a second suite. It really helps homeowners that would otherwise not do a second suite create a second suite and get into being part of the rental market and creating some more opportunities for other families to be affordable. It's great for seniors who want to be able to stay in their home, that are looking at moving out of their home because they can't afford it, and if they can create a second suite and move somebody in, it offsets some of their costs and allows them to stay in their own home longer. It's great for young couples starting out because they can get into a second suite at an affordable rate compared to the market rate that's out there right now. And it was mentioned earlier, not all second suites are affordable. You can build them affordably, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get rented out affordably. So the county, if you're getting money from them, you've got restrictions on the amount of rent that you can charge, and that helps keep it affordable. But if you're doing it on your own, you are able to charge market rates, and at that point, it wouldn't be considered affordable. It would have been affordable for you as a property owner to build it, but it's not necessarily adding to the affordable housing or making housing more affordable in the short term. I think the more people that build second suites and add to the rental stock, right now we have an occupancy rate somewhere around 1.5%. And the healthy market is about 5%. So we have a long way to go to build a lot more units that will allow the market to get healthier, which could take some pressure off the high end of the rental rates. So overall, building second suites is a good idea. It makes use of existing infrastructure. It makes use of well, I don't know what I was going to say. Moving on. So I'm just going to skip through that, and these are a bunch of the benefits that are there for the property owner. I'm not really going to speak to them, but I'll put them up there so you can kind of take a look at them. Just in terms of building a unit and the costs involved, you do need to really look at what you want to build and how you want to build it. So you might have different options. You can do 3 units on a property now, as it's been brought forward by Andrea and John. And you have to decide, where you want that second unit to go. It can be expensive, depending on where you decide to put it, because you've got a lot of, and I know Michael will talk about this a little bit, but the units have to be safe in order to be legal, and they have to meet building code, and so there's a lot of fire separation things that need to be dealt with. And it can be a real struggle for a homeowner that doesn't have any experience in construction, has never really gone through a permit process before, and understanding building codes to really understand what's involved in creating a second suite. And that's where it's really important to do research and ask really good questions, and get an organization like Redwood or others that are familiar with it, that have done a lot of them, to help you walk through that process, and that kind of takes that stress component out of trying to build a second suite, because it'll go very smoothly. In terms of a timeline, once you start the process, at least I'll speak for us, but once you start the process with us, it's 3 to 4 months, depending on the scope of the project, to get through all the approvals, get the units constructed and opened up for occupancy. When we started out, it wasn't quite that quick, but we've got a lot of experience at it now, and have a really great working relationship with the city staff and the building department and inspectors, and it's much more smooth, goes much smoother now. But for somebody who's starting out doing it on their own, and I'm sure Michael will speak to this a little bit, there can be a lot of roadblocks that come up because of lack of understanding or lack of resources, consultants or professionals that know what they're doing to actually make it happen smoothly. So it can take a lot longer if you're trying to do something on your own and you don't have the experience to do it. I don't know, I probably got 2 minutes. Anything else? There's our website. So let's look at our website. We've got right on our front page there an opportunity for people to start the process where they can click on the website and they can go in, and we've got an actual form that's filled out really well. There's some really good questions in there that allow you to sort of think through what it is that you've got in terms of your own property. You can go on, you can fill it out, and it gives us a lot of great information to start with, to start on whether or not your property would work as a second suite, with a second suite or not, and whether there's potential even for a third suite on the property. So filling that out as much detail on that form as you possibly can, and answering the questions as fully as you can really help start the process out in a smooth way. Yeah, if there is an interest out there in the second suite, feel free to visit our website. And we have a lot of resources on there as well in terms of some analysis on what your returns could be on doing a second suite and offering it at an affordable price. So there's some good information on there as well as on the city and the county's websites. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to give you a very quick presentation from the building department's perspective about second suites. 10 minutes is a very challenging time frame to provide the information that I really want to give you, so it will be very high level. It is not going to be a course on the building code. If you can walk away with a few key points that you might understand something about what the building code requirements are and why they exist, that will be helpful. And that's my goal. So what does the building department do? This is our Bible. We ensure buildings are safe for people. The building code is a big book, and there's 2,100 pages. There's about 200 reference standards in that book. It's complicated.
I rest my case on getting some help.
It's a complicated book, and the biggest mistake that we often see is people thinking they know the code, and the problem with that is you don't know what you don't know. So you come in guns blazing, but you don't understand that there's interconnected requirements in the code, and unless you have a lot of experience with it, you will get it wrong. And we are here to help you. We are your friend. We have the same goal. We want to make sure that you comply with that book. We are a great source of knowledge, and we will help you get to the right point, but you have to include us. With respect to basement apartments, quickly, there are 3 paths that you can, that will affect you depending on the type of unit that you have. So the building code, generally speaking, applies to all new construction. Anytime you put anything out together within certain parameters parameters defined in the Building Code Act, you require a building permit. So the building code would apply to a new built unit or any unit less than 5 years old. The part of the code that would apply would be Part 9, which is houses and small buildings. Pretty basic requirements, very prescriptive, but a little more complex for basement apartments. The second legislation that might apply is Part 11 of the building code. You're still within the building code, but this applies to a unit that is more than 5 years old. What Part 11 does, it recognizes that existing buildings might be more difficult to obtain compliance with than a new build, and it gives you some concessions. Part 11 is much more complicated than Part 9. Again, if you don't know it, don't even try it. Get someone who's experienced. I'm going to echo what Tim said. You know, if you can find someone both from the design side and the construction side who has experience, if they've built 10, 15, 20, 30 basement apartments, you know, you've got a good chance of success. If this is your first time doing something, there's a lot of unknown pitfalls that you will absolutely encounter. Only 2 types of units, legal and illegal. That's as simple as it gets. And we want all the units in Barrie to be legal, so please help us do that. Our cost for obtaining a building permit, it's about $1 a square foot. So if your unit is 1,000 square feet, it's going to cost you $1,000. I'm going to tell you right now, that is the best deal in town. You get our expertise, you get to be legal, and you get our inspectors coming out helping you along the way. That is cheap, cheap, cheap for a project that might cost $60,000. Money well spent. The next one, yeah. Okay, this is for the fire department. With basement apartments, the most significant issue is fire safety. Anytime you take a building and you compartmentalize that building into more than one space where there's 2 occupants and I'm on this side of the building, I have no control of what's happening on this side of the building, that creates a hazard. If I live in one house with my kids, I'm supposed to know as a reasonably good parent what the heck everybody is doing, and I have reasonably good control over that. When you split it in 2 and I don't have access to the other side, I have no idea what's going on. So that makes the building more dangerous. There's more risk, particularly for fire. So there are 4, and a lot of the building code relates to fire safety. There's a lot of other things, but this is one of the key things, particularly for basement apartments. So there's 4, I guess, tenets of fire safety and how to deal with it. The first is egress and exits, making sure that you have a safe way to get out of the building. And so with basement apartments, that sometimes includes windows, and we can talk about that later. The second thing is containment. When a fire starts in a building, the code has provisions in it to contain that fire to a certain space so that everywhere other than where the fire is safe. So we're trying to protect smoke and fire. So those are called fire separations. Also early detection, everyone knows about smoke alarms. Everyone knows that you should have smoke alarms in your house. They provide early detection. They give you the extra time that you need to get out of the building safely. If you don't have a smoke detector, you're not going to have that extra time, and you may never, if you're sleeping, you may never wake up. So it's about early detection. And then early suppression doesn't apply so much to basement apartments, but it could. I believe in BC they require houses to be sprinklered. But for other types of buildings, when a sprinkler system goes off, that contains the fire and could possibly even suppress the fire before the fire department even gets there. Well, how wonderful was that? So those are the 4 concepts of fire safety in the code, and there's requirements spread out all through the code that deal with all of those concepts. So I'm going to speak a little more specifically to fire separations because they are really probably the single most important thing in a second dwelling unit. So there's a requirement in the code. It doesn't matter which path you take, the 3 paths that I described earlier, you need to have separation between the units. The biggest thing about fire separations is they must be a continuous barrier to prevent the passage of fire and smoke. And that's the challenge. And if it isn't purposefully built as a continuous barrier, it is not. So the message I will give you, if you walk into an existing existing finished basement and it's all drywalled and it looks lovely, it probably doesn't comply because I recently finished my basement, living somewhere else, and I did not build fire separations because I was just finishing my basement. So it might look like it complies, but it doesn't. And the devil is in the details, and when there's a fire and that smoke will go wherever it can, if it's not continuous, it's not going to work. So that's a key point. The other thing with fire separation, I'll speak to this a little bit later, the furnace rooms are always a challenge because you look up and it looks like spaghetti and it's like, how am I supposed to provide a barrier in here? That is probably the most difficult thing in constructing a basement apartment. Okay, other code requirements. I'll just go through this really quickly. So windows, there's actually 4 reasons for windows in the code. Egress, which we sometimes require in basement apartments, natural lighting, ventilation, and spatial separation. So often there is something being done with a window when you're building a basement apartment, and there's 4 different requirements in the code respecting windows. And one that I'll just touch on really quickly is spatial separations. You can't necessarily just start putting windows all over the place on the side of your house, because the code has requirements that limit the percentage of windows that you can have in a side yard to prevent fire from spreading to the next property. Most houses typically have those window sizes maximized already because it's not a lot of windows. And that's why you see lots of houses with very few windows on the side of in the sides. Structural issues, so if you put a window in, if you're going to make it wider, there's obviously lintels that you need to deal with. You're affecting the foundation wall. Depending on how you do it, you may or may not create a need for reinforcing. So lintels, columns, I don't want that column in the middle of this living room. I'm just going to take it out. No, you're not. You can move columns. It costs money. You can actually do whatever you want structurally. You can do whatever you want. You are only limited by your budget. If you want 0 columns anywhere, knock yourself out, but it's going to be so expensive. So, there's practical limits to what you can and can't do. You can move columns, but it generally means putting in new footings, and that's an additional expense. Walkout construction, probably the best thing you can do. The best feature of any basement apartment is a basement apartment that has a door from the basement level. If you have a basement walkout, that's golden. If you don't have a basement walkout, my recommendation would be build a walkout. So there's structural issues associated with that. The walls on a basement walkout are different than a normal foundation wall. They have to be designed properly. You probably need a professional to help you with that. Ceiling heights, very quickly, 6'4" is the minimum height required in a basement. It's fairly low, I think, but most people don't have too much difficulty complying with that, unless you're in a really, really old house, and then sometimes you need to lower the floor. You might need to do underpinning. There's some other associated issues that could occur. This is actually a typo. It should be window sizes. Window sizes are 5 or 10% of the room area. That's the natural light provision. Mechanical, again, you're going to need to provide, if you're breaking up a floor space, putting in new walls, you're going to have to apply additional supply airs and ventilation for that space. That's pretty well common sense. And as well with plumbing, you're going to have difficulty renting your unit if you don't have a kitchen, a washroom, or a laundry room. So these facilities, and they're also code requirements. Electrical, get an electrician to do your electrical. The ESA is a separate permit. We don't regulate the electrical, but it's very important that you do get a permit for that. Typical pitfalls that we see. So one is the furnace rooms. It's really difficult to create a smoke barrier in a furnace room because you've got ducting, you've got electrical wires, you've got gas lines, you've got water pipes, you've got all kinds of stuff in there. Probably the best advice I can give you is remove everything you can and then build your ceiling and then reinstate it, and you have to use, I'll call it special caulking, to go around all the openings that go through that barrier because it's required to be a fire separation. Existing drywall, we have lots of problems with people thinking that existing drywall is fine. So it's not a fire separation because it's not continuous, and it may not be a fire separation that has the correct rating, which is a time limit that the fire is supposed to stay contained. Basement walkouts, I think they're fantastic to have. but you do need to have the proper structural design of the wall. You likely need to underpin the existing structure. It's expensive, but in my opinion, worth it. Windows, there's a structural effect from putting in a bigger window, so the lintels, the foundation wall, and then the spatial separation issue that I spoke to. This isn't on the slide, I've just written it in. A very common pitfall, unfortunately, is no inspections. If we don't get called to do our inspections, we cannot do our work. If anyone thinks that you're going to call out a building inspector when your basement is completely finished and you think things are going to go smoothly, they're not, because we haven't been given the opportunity to do our work. So please give us the opportunity to do our job. So when in doubt, hire a professional. The code is complicated. As I said before, a little knowledge can be very dangerous. And I've seen it a million times in my career. The cost to fix is so much more expensive than the cost to do it right the first time. People are driven by the very small and quick win of saving, say if we're talking about $1,000. That's a quick win for them. I don't need these guys, I'm just going to do it and I'm done. But when we come out and everything's wrong, it might cost you $15,000 to fix it. So it really is a case of doing it right the first time. So we have the same goal, and we are here to help you get to what you want, to keep buildings and everyone inside them safe. So here's a quick overview. Plan your project and apply. You can apply via our athlete program. There is online applications. There are online inspection requests. We also have a fast track program which gets you your permit much quicker than the normal permit process. Build and inspect, please call for your inspections. We've recently added something new in our athlete. Once the final inspection is signed off, your unit is automatically registered. So easy peasy, and then rent. And that's it, thank you very much.